Uh, when I begin curating TEDx Puget Sound each year, it's a very organic process. And basically it starts with the theme that we come up with. What's the theme? Then we create an intention. I just kind of put out to the universe an intention to attract the kind of speakers that will just be perfect for the event. And my next speaker responded to a tweet that I sent out about TEDx Puget Sound, and I'm so glad he did because we have gotten to know each other and we've collaborated not only on this event but another event, and he's been a delight to work with, and I'm so glad that I got to meet him. And his name is Greg Bamford, and here's his talk on the serious business of purposeful play.
So I was walking my daughter to school a couple months ago, and suddenly she said to me, "You know, Dad, we don't have any toys at my school." And I was a little bit confused because my daughter is 4 years old. And if you went to her classroom, you would see puzzles and beads and paints and blocks. You would pretty much see a big room of toys. I didn't really know what to say, so she got more insistent, which is what she does, and she pulled on my sleeve and she said, "Dad, those puzzles in there, people think that they are toys, but they're for work." Just to give you a little bit of context, I really liked that moment. My daughter goes to a Montessori school, and if you've ever sent anyone to Montessori school, you know that whether a child is painting a picture or building a tower, whether they're pretending to be a robot or they're pretending to be a princess, that activity is always called work. That playing and thinking and pretending is, in that classroom, serious business. And no one has to tell that child when they're making a machine out of Legos that what they're doing has a purpose. I'm bringing this up at a TEDx dedicated to moving from ideas to action because I really believe that innovation, among about 42 other things, is a matter of maintaining that same level of emotional engagement that we see in young children. And many of the gaps that we see between an idea and actually getting it done happen because we're not paying attention to how people engage with ideas. Kids don't really think of play and work as something different. Adults do this all the time. Even when we say things like, "all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," or "work hard, play hard," we think we're talking up play and its importance, but we're also maintaining the idea of this dichotomy, that they're two fundamentally different things. And when we have this space of work and this space of play, what ends up happening is we're leaving this fertile territory unexplored with our teams. And that's the space that I would call purposeful play. For me, purposeful play is not about play as a break from the daily grind, although that's a good thing. Purposeful play is about using play as a tool to explore real, relevant problems and opportunities that are facing you. 16 years ago, there was a small, nondescript bank in suburban Oregon with 7 stores and 40 employees. Even by local standards, it really was not much of a big deal. When a new CEO came on the market in 1994, one of the first things he did was to tell everyone who answered the phone to call it the world's greatest bank. Many of you know this bank, right? Today, Umpqua Bank is the fastest growing bank in the country. They have 186 stores. And if you go into an Umpqua Bank, you will see free cookies and coffee and Wi-Fi and bright open spaces. You might see a yoga class or a community meeting. If you didn't see the word bank on the sign and you walked in, you would think you had walked into some sort of hip Swedish coffee house. You wouldn't know it was a bank at all. So many of you know that story, but here's the thing that gets me. What was it like for that team to start answering the phone by calling it the world's greatest bank? It had absolutely no connection with reality. Today, we can look in retrospect and we can say, well, of course that made sense. But there's a move there. It didn't have a connection to reality. What it did have was the emotional pull of play. A simple narrative that has yourself as the hero. The emotional pull of superheroic language. It had a narrative and it had an emotional pull. This is something that you can use in your organizations. I'm thinking about Scott's presentation and what he talked about in terms of what happens in creative organizations. And I think there's a balance that you want to achieve wherever you are. A lot of organizations really emphasize execution. I worked this fall with an international consulting firm, and I helped them develop their vision. At the end of it, we did a little bit of role-playing. We had a nice party at the house of the chairman. We decided to bring in a case of wine. We custom bottled it. We had a label on it saying it happened in the year 2017. We decided that the whole party would happen in the year 2020, and what we would do is celebrate the fact that this organization had landed on the cover of Harvard Business Review. We brought in copies of the magazine, we showed it to them, and the purpose of the evening would be to toast their success and to talk about the memories that they didn't yet have, but that they will have in 10 years' time. And I have to tell you, these were pretty high-achieving, serious adults. They had top-tier MBAs, they had major Fortune 100 credentials, and I kind of felt like the dork in the room, like I was asking them to do the dress-up version of Dungeons & Dragons. I wasn't so sure it would go over as well as I might have liked. But you know what happened in that moment? They kind of loosened up, they started telling stories, and as they told those stories, they started to see themselves in the stories that other people were telling. For a certain moment, it didn't just become pretend, it became real. Not real in reality, but real enough in their mind that they could see it. And the next week, we got a call from the managing partner, and what she said was, you know, I've had several critical phone calls over the past week, and they've gone more smoothly than ever before because suddenly I have a new sense of clarity about where we're going. Now notice this, in the story I just told you, that I haven't really given you any fancy new tool. I'm certainly not the only person who's done that with a group of clients. There's nothing high-tech in there. The power of purposeful play is not really about a fancy new tool. It's about giving ourselves permission to use the tools that we already have. We don't really believe in purposeful play in most organizations, do we? Think about brainstorming. Think about the last brainstorming session that you went to, and think about whether or not that worked. My experience is that we start to throw out 2 or 3 ideas, and all of a sudden, play mind stops and work mind begins. We want to dissect, we want to take it apart, we want to evaluate, and at that point, play is over. We lose that profitable potential 12th idea because we weren't willing to give ourselves permission to engage in a state of play with each other. We've lost that same intensity of imagination that comes so naturally to a 4-year-old. And there's a problem there. Because every innovation that you might want to bring to market in your industry imposes costs on you and the people around you that are very real, while, for a period of time, the benefits are entirely imaginary. Exactly as imaginary as being a robot or a princess. How do you get your team through that period? Here's what I want from you. I want you to go back to wherever you work and wherever you play, and I want you to model an intense commitment to play. I need you to take it seriously. Not as a place where you're going to be all the time, but as a place where you're going to be some of the time. As a place where we can think through real issues and get traction on them. I want you to have fewer meetings around a conference table and more meetings doing things with your hands. I want you as much as possible to play with your products and your stores. I want you to tell yourself stories, not only about your future, but about your customers and all the reasons they might come to you. And I want you to do it for 2 reasons. The first is your customer. You have to avoid competing on price alone. But the second is about your employees. I want you to avoid competing on price alone with them too. The people you work with might spend more waking minutes with you than with their family. And I think you owe them more than money. Those 4-year-olds at that Montessori school are going to show up and work with us one day. And everyone in this room and everyone you work with, they were 4-year-olds at one point in their life. And what all of us have in common is that we are wired to learn and grow from birth. We are wired to imagine things that are pretend and then make them real. And the way that we do that is we play with them. We pretend in our mind until they are so real in our mind that we make them real for others. Thank you very much.